By now, us NFL fans are all aware that the Kansas City Chiefs get significantly favored by the refs. Whether that's benefiting off of soft calls late in the game, refs missing blatant calls against the Chiefs in crucial moments, or flat out making calls to win games for Kansas City in the Super Bowl. But how can the refs continue to get away with this? Is the NFL just favoring the Chiefs, or is the game that we love actually rigged? Well, I took it upon myself to take a real deep look into it, and the answer will surprise you. In the 2024 season, there were only 8 teams in the league who had less than 100 penalties called against them. Unsurprisingly, the Chiefs were one of those 8 teams. They had the 4th least amount of penalties called against them with just 94 calls all season, and as a matter of fact, the Chiefs haven't had a season with 100 penalties called against them since 2021. With what we witnessed from the refs all last season, and with the numbers I just gave you, unless you're a Chiefs fan, you're probably pretty upset with this unfair treatment the Chiefs have been getting. But what if I told you the Chiefs don't get any extra help from the refs at all? Believe it or not, the Chiefs didn't even rank in the top 20 in the NFL this season in penalty yards gained. They were ranked 22nd in the league, and actually the New York Jets gained the most yards this season from penalties. Not only that, but the Chiefs on the entire season actually only outgained their opponents by 20 yards on penalties. You might have a hard time believing this, but that would rank them 17th in penalty yard differential. Half the league outgained their opponents by more yards than that, and some teams by a significant margin. There were 9 teams in the league this season that had over 100 more penalty yards gained than their opponent, and what's crazy is the Minnesota Vikings outgained their competitors by 340 yards this season. Yet somehow not a single person all year would complain about the Vikings' penalty disparity. The only complaints were about the Chiefs. Kansas City O-lineman Jawan Taylor is also, in back-to-back seasons with the Chiefs, one of the 3 most penalized offensive linemen in the entire NFL. But maybe it's not the Chiefs as a whole that benefit greatly from the refs, maybe it's just Patrick Mahomes. And you would again be incorrect. Since 2020, Mahomes has only received 13 roughing the passer calls. There are 8 quarterbacks in the league with more. Ryan Tannehill hasn't even been a starter on a team for a couple of years, and he has 19. Both Jared Goff and Josh Allen nearly double Mahomes with 23 and 24 roughing the passer calls. The dialogue around the game being rigged in the current NFL is the exact type of narrative we would hear around the league with Tom Brady during the Patriots dynasty. I wouldn't be shocked if some of you guys still think that Tom Brady had a great whistle and would continuously get soft calls throughout his career. And I don't blame you, because that's what the media pushes. But Tom really didn't get much benefit. Obviously, you have situations like the Tuck rule, which was a horrible call, but generally speaking, Brady only got the 11th most amount of career roughing the passer calls, and he played well longer than any other quarterback in NFL history. In his 23-year career, Tom had 35 roughing calls. Meanwhile, Ryan Fitzpatrick received 52. Fitzpatrick averaged more than one of those penalties per 3 games that he played throughout his legendary career. That would mean that Tom Brady would need 55 more calls in the 253 games that he played from 2009 until retirement to match that. And Patrick Mahomes, he would need 17 more of those calls throughout the 133 games that he's played to match that. And not once have I ever heard that the league is rigged for Ryan Fitzpatrick. And that's simply because the league is not rigged. Let's take a more broad look at this for just a moment. It would make much more sense if the league was rigged to have the biggest franchise in the league win the most games and be the faces of the league. Yet, here we are, and the Dallas Cowboys are the laughingstock of the NFL and haven't appeared in a conference championship game since the 1995 season. The Cowboys are estimated to be worth between $10 to $11 billion, making them the most valuable sports franchise in the entire world, more than any soccer team even. Yet, they haven't even been to a Super Bowl, let alone NFC championship game this century. Cowboys aside, New York is one of the biggest sports markets in the United States, yet season after season, the Jets and the Giants continue to miss the playoffs. Anyone remember when the last time the Los Angeles Chargers have won a Super Bowl was? So why on earth would the NFL rig their league for a team that resides in Missouri? Well, let's take a look at some of the controversial calls late in games that benefited the Chiefs over the last couple of seasons and see if they were the correct calls or not. We'll start with the most controversial call the Chiefs have ever been a part of, the holding call in their first Super Bowl matchup against the Eagles. As you can see, James Bradberry is clearly grabbing Juju's jersey. This is a textbook holding call. And if you don't believe me, then hear it from James Bradberry himself.
The jersey, they called holding. I was hoping they would let it rock, but was a holding.
But the Chiefs' path to even get to that Super Bowl game was set up by an unnecessary roughness call made against the Bengals in the 2022 AFC Championship game. Clearly, Joseph Asai pushes Mahomes well after he's already stepped out of bounds. This is easily the correct call. Fast forward to week 2 of this season, and with the game on the line, the refs threw a pass interference call on the Bengals for this play right here. Somehow this call was controversial, but this was an obvious pass interference call. The defender clearly hits Rashee Rice before he makes contact with the ball. You can't dispute this. However, a week later, a very similar thing would happen in the Chiefs-Falcons game, except the roles were reversed. It was the Chiefs defender arriving early on the play, and this was not called a flag. The Chiefs did get away with one here, and this should have been called for pass interference. In week 9 against the Buccaneers, there was a missed false start on Jawan Taylor on a play that would result in a touchdown. This was also a bad no call. There were definitely multiple instances in the divisional round matchup against the Texans where the Chiefs genuinely did benefit off of bad calls consistently. This is really the only Chiefs game this season where I really am on the side of poor officiating from start to finish on the side of the Chiefs. The following week in the AFC Championship game against the Bills, Xavier Worthy caught a deep pass but the ball hit the ground. The refs ruled it a catch. This was definitely a close call. However, I believe it is the correct one. In my opinion, he maintained possession through the ground, which would mean the call stands. Later on in the game, the Bills would go for a QB sneak on 4th down, and the refs would rule Josh Allen short. I believe he did get the first down, and that's a general consensus, but it would be ruled a turnover on downs. In the end, this call is not the only reason the Bills lost though. They had a chance at a game-winning drive, and they failed. In the Super Bowl, there was a bad call for pass interference on A.J. Brown early on in the game, but the refs were making bad calls both ways, and the Chiefs did end up getting blown out anyways. Clearly, there have been lots of bad calls made, but if we're being serious for a moment, put aside your Chiefs hating bias, there are always bad calls being made late in games for every single team. The refs missing the obvious face mask against Sam Darnold in the end zone. Aaron Rodgers benefited for one of the worst roughing the passer calls I've ever seen. This play was somehow called a holding on Cooper DeJean, and I could go on and on for hours if I really wanted to. What's really going on here is that people are sick of seeing the Chiefs win games, so when there is a bad call, the talks about that call get amplified and posted way more over social media than any other bad call. This cycle ends up getting repeated, and eventually we end up right where we are right now, with people claiming the league is rigged. Getting upset with the flags and calling the league rigged is not going to change any of the outcomes. The team that plays better 9 out of 10 times is going to win the game. If you don't want the game's outcome to be determined by the refs, then your team should have put themselves in a better position to win the game. And no, I'm not a Chiefs fan. I am a Buccaneers fan. We just need to do better as NFL fans than coming to the conclusion that because there is a bad call that the league is rigged. But there are a couple ways that we could fix the way the league is currently officiated to make the game much more fair. The NFL did announce that they are going to be putting chips in the footballs next season. This is a huge start, but what the NFL really needs is the ability to challenge penalties. I still to this day have absolutely no clue why they removed the ability to challenge pass interference calls. In my opinion, when they introduced it, it was one of the best rule changes they ever made. But my proposition to the NFL is give teams the ability to have one challenge on a penalty in each half. I truly believe this would be the best rule change the NFL could possibly make. But at the end of the day, that's not the current NFL we're in. And if you're complaining about the league being rigged, you are just coping.